What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with Reactions to the Classics. Today, we got a top 10 songs from Dragon reaction brought to us by a friend, longtime supporter, and patron of the channel, Joseph. Thank you, Joseph. Always appreciate you, everything you bring. Also appreciate all the patrons who make this thing go. Guys, if you guys support us in any way, we greatly appreciate it. It makes this channel happen, man. There's a Patreon link below. There'll be a Patreon link on the end screen. Check it out after this. I don't know anything about Dragon. Never even heard of Dragon, the rock band. So I'm going to let Joseph take these festivities over, and I'll merely be his narrator. Here we go. Joseph says, welcome to what amounts to a brief and in many ways inadequate introduction to the greatest, or at least my favorite, that's the same thing, right? New Zealand band of all. In their heyday, basically 76 to 89, Dragon created a huge string of Australia-Asian pop rock anthems known and loved on both sides of the Tasman, though it is a source of eternal shame that their Australian success often eclipsed that received in their native homeland, and were an outfit that boasted superb musicianship. No surprise, perhaps, for a band who began as an art rock group, along with consistently tight songwriting, capped off with the ultimate Kiwi frontman and lead vocalist Mark Hunter. Actually, that does him a disservice. Mark was one of the greatest frontmen from anywhere ever. His untimely death from throat cancer in 1998, aged just 44, still stings decades later, and I place him about equal with Bowie on the list of artists I'm gutted I never got to see live. Wow. He says credit for the bulk of the interview quotes used in the below in our countdown here goes to the revered Australian rock historian Glenn A. Baker and his excellent liner notes for the band's 1998 compilation Snake Eyes on the Paradise. Others are taken from contemporary TV interviews. Joseph says the band formed in Auckland in 1972 and was founded by Mark's older brother, bassist Todd. When Mark left his hometown of, I thought I might not have hometowns and just words I wouldn't know, but no, already. Tamaranu? He even said enjoy pronouncing that one. You took pleasure in this, Joseph. I know you did. For Auckland, he quickly entered the fold, though initially as a backing vocalist and percussionist, before his obvious charisma made it apparent that there could only really be one role in the band for him. While they enjoyed a level of popular success as a live act, their prog stylings failed to translate to commercial success, although the fact that the albums didn't chart in New Zealand doesn't mean as much as it's sometimes made out. We didn't have an albums chart until May 1975, Joseph says. You could just as well have said that no Beatles albums had made the charts. It's a good point. So two major decisions were made almost simultaneously: to switch to a more commercial pop/rock sound and to head to Australia to try to make inroads in the much larger market on offer. As Mark would succinctly put it many years later, New Zealand couldn't feed us, we left. The departure would prove to be permanent. At this point, the band consisted of the Hunter brothers, multi-instrumentalist Ray Goodwin, with Neil Story on drums, and new recruit Robert Taylor on guitar. Goodwin soon left, and the final, well, almost piece of the puzzle came with his replacement, keyboardist Paul Hewson. As Todd recalled in 1998, quote, we dragged Paul over from New Zealand after we'd failed miserably with our first Australian single, Starkist, because we knew he had a great pop sensibility. We didn't know that much about him except that he wrote great songs. Sure enough, Hewson would go on to pen almost all of their subsequent string of 70s hits. The first of those hits this time was actually a full band collaboration. We'll get to the reasons for that a little later, but would prove to be the only one Story played on, as he died at age 22 of a heroin overdose in September of 1976, just as the single was making its way up the charts. The band considered splitting at that point, but management advised recruiting drummer Kerry Jacobson, and thus the 70s classic lineup was complete, albeit in tragic circumstances. 3 best-selling albums and a succession of hits followed throughout 1977 and 78, but the constant touring quickly took its toll, and everything came to a head on their disastrous U.S. tour in 1978. Some of the gory details are easily available online, so I won't go over those here, and I'm not going to either, guys. But suffice to say, the band sacked Mark as a result. They managed one more minor hit without him, but the subsequent Markless album, Power Play, sunk like a stone, and the band split up in late 1979. In 1994, Mark recalled his fire, and he said, quote, I got fired and was told to piss off, so I went, pissed off to Morocco and London. I was gone for about 7 months. I vaguely came back to sanity after a very intense 5 years. I think the workload broke up the original band. In those days, you do 2 or 3 gigs a night, and we did that for 5 years. That's absolutely insane, guys. I was kicking up about the constant touring, the fact that we were still traveling around 2 to a room, even though we were raking in an enormous amount of money. Also, that was a stage when I did have problems with drugs and alcohol. While he may have been understating that last point, Joseph says, the fact is he did clean himself up and managed to launch a reasonably successful solo career. But the band, particularly the Hunter brothers, felt they had unfinished business, and the classic lineup reformed in 1982 for a successful tour and less successful comeback single, the Houston-penned Ramona. Their next single, however, Rain, restored them to major chart success, which they were largely able to sustain for the remainder of the 80s. American Alan Mansfield had been brought in to produce, with the Hunters telling him he'd have to join the band if it didn't hit number 1. It peaked at number 2, and Mansfield did indeed become a member, effectively joining the Hunters as the core of the band alongside a slightly revolving door styled set of sidemen as the other classic lineup members left. First Jacobson in 1983, then Taylor and Houston in 1984. Houston would become the second Dragon member to die of a drug overdose shortly after, though he had other severe health issues, as Mark explained in 1994. Quote, he had scoliosis, his spine was breaking apart. He had to soak his hands in very hot water before he could go on and play. It gave him terrible arthritis. He would have been in a wheelchair in a couple of years. It was inoperable. That's some bad stuff, guys. As a guy who goes through some physical stuff, that's some bad stuff. After 1989's Bondi Road album, the band concentrated mostly on touring, though Mark would release a pair of solo albums in the early 90s before the band returned for the Incarnations album in 1995, an album largely made up of acoustic reworkings of earlier material. Todd Hunter left following this release, and the band continued to tour. But in November of 1997, Mark received his cancer diagnosis, effectively ending the band. The reverence with which he and the band were held within the Australian music industry was demonstrated by benefit concerts held for him and his family in Melbourne and Sydney, the latter of which saw Men at Work regroup for the first time in a decade to perform, and the remaining members of INXS performing live for the first time since the death of Michael Hutchence, alongside many other notable industry figures. Wow, that's huge stuff on both those accounts. Todd would eventually reform Dragon in 2006 with another ex-Kiwi and Mark Williams as lead singer. But while they have remained a consistent touring and recording act, and Todd absolutely has a right to perform as Dragon for me without Mark Hunter, I just can't get excited by the prospect. I'll give the final word to Mark, speaking in 1994. He said, quote, I feel I've been very lucky to have been in Dragon. Lucky to have been born with talent, lucky to have had parents who didn't crush it. I'm really lucky to have been in a band and come over and be accepted here in Australia to sing great songs. Joseph says, perhaps, unsurprisingly, what may or may not be on Spotify is a varied mix. Over here, he's in the UK now, the 70s albums are all present, correct, but much of the 80s material isn't. I'm starting with a couple of videos anyway, more to give a visual guide to the band, and you can judge whether their 70s or 80s looks were better or worse. Otherwise, we'll go audio only with Spotify or YouTube as needed. Those are kind of notes to me, but I want you guys to know that, like, if you're listening in the States and you hear stuff you like, man, you're going to have to dig a little bit to find it, right? You might not be able to find it on Spotify or Apple Music. You may have to go to YouTube. Well, let's get this thing started. All right, guys, before we start, just a reminder, the music will not be in the video, but it'll be a Vimeo link below. Follow along with us. We're going to start off with one of those videos at number 10, Wait Until Tomorrow, 1976 non-singable, later included on the Greatest Hits Volume 1, released in 1979. Joseph says this Robert Taylor pen tune wasn't a hit, but later led off their first Greatest Hits album, a staple in most Australian homes, even after most extensive compilations appeared in the 80s and beyond. Certainly we had copies on both cassette and CD at various points, so it got around just the same. At the time, perhaps the most significant thing was it housed the first Paul Hewson penned Dragon tune on its B-side, but this highlights that Taylor and the Hunter brothers continue to contribute material. It was merely that Hewson songs would almost always be the singles. Surprisingly, this doesn't seem to have been a source of friction between the bandmates, which is shocking. Joseph says, note that Story plays drums on the track, but it's Jacobson in the video. Wait Until Tomorrow from 1976. This was purebred 1976, right? Really good song, man. Really good song. I enjoyed it. It was fun. I don't know that the video directors or whoever was shooting this did them any favors. I don't think it was shot in exactly the best way, just in the way it was arranged and put together, but a fun song. Mark was having a little hard time matching the voice up, right, with the music, but yeah, man, a good, fun introduction to these guys. Now we go to the second track, also a video, Dreams of Ordinary Men, from Dreams of Ordinary Men in 1986. Joseph said by this point the lineup had evolved into what Glenn A. Baker describes as musically the most impressive Dragon lineup of all, with the Hunters and Alan Mansfield joined by Doane Perry, ex-Jethro Tull, on drums, and Tommy Emmanuel, who would later become a hugely successful solo artist, on guitar. This lineup recorded in New York with, of all people, Todd Rundgren producing. Todd just shows up everywhere, man. A fact that even got a mention on the front cover. He also garnered a few co-writing credits, including this track, Although he wasn't that beloved of the band, Todd Hunter's recollection was that Todd Rundgren was a very strange guy, not your normal producer. He and I would argue as to who could care less about something. You couldn't impress him. Often you couldn't even interest him. Though he took to Tommy for a while, he said he was one of the best 3 guitarists he'd ever heard. Wow. While the results are about as 1986 as you can get, Joseph said, its only rival for title of my favorite Dragon album is 1978's Oh Zambezi. All right, man, let's check out this video. Dreams of Ordinary Men. I said the last track was pure 1976, although it was 5 in 1976, so I don't really remember it. This is 1986. I was 15. I remember it very well. This is the kind of music I would have listened to. I'd have been driving around, jamming out to Dragon. These are the kind of tunes I like. They're totally 1986. The video, Mark's mullet, the clothing, the fast cuts, everything, man. Loved it all. Everybody say amen. These are the dreams of ordinary men. This is the world we'll be living in, out of the dreams of ordinary men. I'm not going to break down the lyrics. That part was just so catchy. Really good. Really well done, man. I mean, if you don't like 80s music, you're not going to like this. I happen to grow up in it, so right up my alley. Now we're going to be over on Spotify for this one. An interesting title here, Get That Jive from Sunshine in 1977. Joseph says, alongside Paul Hewson's songs, Todd largely credits their 70s success to Peter Dawkins' production. He said, quote, Peter really knew what we needed, though we despised him at the time for making us sound so poppy. Dawkins was a fellow expat Kiwi who signed them to CBS Australia. Shortly after he signed Air Supply, who was absolutely a monstrous band in the late 70s, early 80s in America. Though the relationship wasn't all smooth sailing. Interviewed in the 90s, he said, quote, it was never easy, but when they were on, it was all worth it. They had a real good rhythm section, and Mark and Todd had great vocal harmonies. I guess I was a real tyrant in the studio because that was the only way it would work. It was because they just didn't want to be there. They weren't a band that demanded more studio time. They wanted less. If I didn't get a song in 2 or 3 takes, I'd have lost them. But every time it came to do a new album and they were asked if they wanted to work with me again, they'd say, okay, yeah. We ended up doing 4 of them together. Hey, sometimes we don't like the things that are best for us, right? Let's check it out. Get That Jive. Just a very catchy song, right? The ooh, up, get that jive. Basically, the girl, he's with the girl, but she's going to play the field, man. She's not going to stay there with you. She basically tells him that from the start, but he's still just, he's going to go after it anyway. But it's a very catchy song, a very 1977 song. Disco's starting to come on, and these guys are trying to save us from it. So enjoyed that one. Next up at number 7, we got Still in Love with You from Oh Zambezi in 1978. So we're going ahead 1 year. Joseph said this would prove to be the last Mark-fronted single for the band ahead of his firing early the following year. Is an excellent example of the disparity between the band's content and their stage persona. As Mark boasted in 1994, I think we're one of the original punk bands, totally effing outrageous. That's why it's hard to describe Dragon, because what the songs were and what the band did live on stage were so opposed to each other, it was quite schizo, really. We had nice, happy songs, but mock rape scenes happening on stage, people vomiting into buckets. I guess I did approach performing in a live theater way. You think? Wow, okay. Thankfully, we don't have a live performance of this with that kind of backing. Still in Love with You, a very catchy song. Guitar works good. What you notice here is the prominence of the keys, but Paul Hewson wrote it, and Paul Hewson's their keyboarder, so of course you're going to write something in with your own stuff. But I mean, Mark's a great vocalist. You just feel it, man. And, you know, I mean, the story of it is Still in Love with You. I mean, basically, this girl lies to him, messes him over, tells him all this stuff. He's saying, I know this is a lie. I know you're doing this to me. That it doesn't matter. I'm still in love with you. One of those things where I think sometimes we can't get over the fact of a failure more so than being in love with a person. I learned that early on in my life when I thought I was still in love with someone. And it wasn't that at all. I just didn't want to admit that it was a failure and all that good stuff. So, I mean, I've been around people too who no matter what, man, they can't get over this person. They can do whatever they want to them. And you're like, what are you doing? And they just do it. So they just let them do it. So it's kind of what that song's about. But also, once again, very catchy, very well done. Now we're going to go back over to YouTube, but everything else is just audio only. For Western Girls from Dreams of Ordinary Men in 1986. We're going back to 86 here. Joseph says by the 80s, the band stage show had changed somewhat. Mock rape scenes were out for a start. Dry humping is a definite phase, as Mark would put it, but no less memorable. Some things I never thought I'd really say on the channel, but hey, man, As Todd explained, with Doane and Tommy, that band was really hot. The interplay between them was just fantastic. Tommy and Mark would do all this outrageous stage stuff too, always trying to one-up each other. Intended by the record label to relaunch them to the world, this lineup won at great expense to said record label the coveted support slot on Tina Turner's 1987 European tour, but not as Dragon. It was just stupid. There was pressure from everywhere. Oh no, Dragon sounds like a heavy metal band and blah, blah, blah. At that stage, we didn't give an S, so we said, okay, we'll call ourselves Hunter. Then we get over there and they say Hunter, heavy metal band, huh? I'm like, oh man, changing the name, but I mean, 1986, heavy metal was really in. Not really what you know as heavy metal if you're thinking Megadeth and Metallica and that sort of stuff. More heavy metal, it was considered in the day I lived through it, of even Bon Jovi and Poison and Def Leppard and Cinderella and Rat and all those groups. But yeah, man, not good to have to change your name, but what are you going to do? Western Girls, very much the same sound as Dreams of Ordinary Men, the second video we watched, number 9 song, same album, same 80s sound, which I really enjoy. I mean, the story is of the Western Girls, right? It's from the girls' point of view now. First, you got to make enough money. You're going to feel right, perfect style, how they dress, going out partying all night. Now you're standing at the fork in the road all alone and wondering which way to go. Any minute, something's going to explode. Then that catchy chorus, break out, you Western girls. One day soon, you're going to change the world. Break out, you Western girls. Hold your head up high. With the way things were done at this time in the 80s and the way the instrumentation was pumped up during the choruses, more so than you get in a lot of other eras. I mean, you could sing anything there and it would be catchy, right? Though you think that life will pass you by, you're a fine thing, never say die. Basically telling her to get out and live. Another evening in a cafe for two, another memory to haunt you. Soon he's going to want to take you home. Darling, are you better off alone? The clock is ticking, you got to decide. So there we go. At the end, it's where's there's life, there's changes. Destiny arranges something for you to hold on to. I mean, that was, the harmonies on that were really well done. It's a good song. All right, we'll start off the top half of this with This Time at number 5. 1970 single Later, included on Sunshine in 1977. Joseph said, as I mentioned earlier, this was the band's breakthrough hit and a band composition. This is a point, as Todd put it, where, quote, we did finally decide to pull our fingers out and go for it as a straight pop band that was forced on us to some extent. Robert Raymond, who toured with Sinatra in Australia, came along and said, okay, boys, I'll manage you. Bring your instruments into my office at 4 p.m. By the time we were set up, it was about 5, and he said, all right, here's the key. I'm locking you in. I'll be back in the morning to let you out, by which I want you to have written 2 hit singles. So he stayed there and wrote This Time, along with the dreaded Morikaze Bind, which is about a chess move. Whatever their initial reluctance, they later embraced their pop status. Mark said in 1989, I like the idea of making barely disposable music, which through fluke or artistry can last for a long time and become a part of people's consciousness. I'd say Dragon made good pop. I think people probably think about us that way, having first heard us at a party somewhere. You get folded into people's lives. Pop doesn't receive enough honor. It can sometimes be a high art form, and I will say that too. There's a lot of pop music I love, man, but sometimes you get in that mindset, oh, it's pop, and you think, oh man, this is music light, right? For the simple-minded. You know what I mean? I'm not simple-minded, right? No, of course not. Pop music's great, man. So I thought that was a really good quote from Mark right there. This Time, man, great keyboard work, great guitar work. I don't mention it enough on here. I'm assuming it's Robert Taylor, but I'm not positive on that. It's because nothing has any sort of instrumentation credits exactly attributed to it, like in the liner notes. So I don't know, but a really good song. I mean, great harmonies. This Time with the keyboards hitting in there, and then just the musical change up and the harmonies coming in. Really good song. All right, we're up to number 4 from the O Zambezi album in 1978, our third track off that. Are You Old Enough? This scares me, man. What are we going to have here? Joseph says, non-PC warning. Can't imagine this song would gain any traction in 2022, but it's been a ubiquitous radio staple for so many decades that nobody bats an eyelid at it down under, and it was their biggest ever single on both sides of the Tasman. Yes, that was their number 1 hit in Australia. But hey, it was another time and place. As Mark said in the 90s, quote, Dragon was a very strange band, but I don't think people are ready to embrace how libertine the 70s were overall. Anything went in the 70s. Everything was quite outrageous, and there was still a huge amount of loonies left over from the 60s. I don't imagine it'll ever be that crazy again, actually. As for Todd, he was more concerned with the musical structure of the song. He said, quote, it was a really weird song to play. It was all over the place. Are you old enough? Where basically, man, he's asking the girl, she's old enough. He's in jail now, waiting on her. I can't imagine going around the mall singing this, right? I might get arrested. Are you old? But it is so catchy, right? It is just so freaking catchy, man. All of it. The harmonies. There's even an uncredited female back in Renee Geyer on there that works so well, the male, female. I mean, by the halfway through the song, you are singing the chorus. Although, like I said, you really couldn't sing it in public now, but I mean, it's an incredibly catchy song. I can see why it was such a gigantic hit for him. Now we go to our last song, not on Spotify. It's Rain from 1983. It was a single later included on Body and the Beat in 1984. The song that ensured the reunited band's continued success through the 80s, staying in the Australian charts for a full 6 months and even did 6 minutes on the Billboard chart, Joseph says. Paul Hewson had effectively checked out as a songwriter by this point, but with both brothers, as well as new recruit Alan Mansfield, all in relationships with creative women, a new wellspring of potential hits began to emerge. This was co-written by Mark Todd and Todd's partner Joanna Pickett. Along with many more Dragon tracks, Todd and Pickett would later write Age of Reason for Aussie superstar John Farnham, which would be the biggest hit any member of Dragon would ever have a hand in creating. Rain, I almost stopped it right before I heard that great Rain ending there. I mean, I only knew one Rain song, and that was from the Lads from Liverpool. This song is so catchy. There's nothing to the lyrics. I think it's basically don't go out in the rain. There's this moment we're not going to get back, he's telling the girl, but just so catchy, man. So well done. I thought the instrumentation on this was top notch. I haven't mentioned Todd Hunter's work on the bass, but it was really good on this. It was really prevalent. But guess what? Todd was one of the co-writers, just like with Paul Hewson and the keyboards and the songs he wrote. Nothing wrong with that. I'd do exactly the same thing. I thought Robert Taylor's been very good on the guitar. I sometimes don't know if it's him or somebody else in here playing it, but I think it's Taylor most of the time. He sounds really good. The drumming was a standout here for me, and I don't know if Kerry Jacobson was still with the group or not. Joseph said he left in 1983. This was released in 1983, so I don't know if he was still on this or not. But the drumming was maybe the highlight musicianship-wise. We got 2 tracks left. We got April Sun in Cuba. Never been to Cuba, so I don't know what that April Sun is all about. It's from the Running Free album in 1977. Joseph says a co-write between Hewson and Mark. Both Peter Dawkins and Todd Hunter list this as their favorite Dragon hit, though Todd added, quote, I hear it on the radio now and can't believe the production, how thin the sound seems in the 90s. April Sun in Cuba, getting a little shout out to Castro, JFK, and the Cuban Missile Crisis in there. The highlight of this is in so many of these songs is the chorus, right? The harmonies. Take me to the April sun in Cuba. Whoa. Take me where the April sun gonna treat me so right, so right, so right. But that part, that first part, take me to the April sun in Cuba, sounds like something. And I just can't place the song. It's driving me crazy. But thought that was a really good offering at number 2. And at number 1, interesting for me, we got a song from Bondi Road all the way in 1989 coming in at number 1, Young Years. Joseph said the last big hit for the band and also my entry point. I vividly recall seeing the music video for the first time and thinking it was great, then really being surprised at learn they were a Kiwi band. So an element of nostalgia and the sad irony of Mark singing Sometimes the Good Do Not Die Young may have ensured it nabbed my top spot, but I think even subjectively it deserves it. In fact, it only seems to get better with age. Launching the album, Todd stated, quote, we're now taking a lot more responsibility for what we do. We got together and made this album ourselves without hiring a producer. We just fought it out with the help of David Hirschfelder from John Farnham's band. Hirschfelder, incidentally, would later become an acclaimed film composer with multiple Oscar nominations to his name. And this is the result. We're taking the blame for everything. Mark added, there's a real sense of wryness throughout the album, which comes from being this particular age, in this particular situation, doing this particular job. We still really don't give an S about the fads, fashions, and trends of rock music. Todd added, the good thing about Dragon is that we've always been a bit unfashionable. That means you can enjoy periods of great success, but not go out of fashion a year later. You just become a sort of a hideous fact of life. All right, number 1 on Joseph's Dragon Top 10 list, we got Young Years. Okay, Young Years coming in at number 1 on Joseph's Top 10 Dragon songs. And from the description, I thought, yeah, Joseph probably is nostalgic on this song. That's why it's number 1, so he can't really separate it from that. Because I have stuff that's like that. It's just how it is. You're trying to be objective. But I got nostalgic on this song, and I never heard it because I graduated from high school in 1989. And the lyrics just going through, I haven't really talked to anybody from high school in 25 years, and it's fine because high school wasn't great for me, but you do think back about some of those nights that were just fun and you had no worries, right? The world is truly, in front of you and you can really do whatever you want to do. as we get out in that world, things happen. And he's just talking about everything that, broken cars, old guitars, waiting here for the time to pass. Time takes its toll, and it took it fast. And then he's just reminiscing on the things they used to do when they were carefree, going out in the water, doing all these things. Those were our young years. Our wings were drying in the sun. Now the winter at our window feels so cold. Where are our young years? Yeah, they go fast. And the cliche really is true. The older you get, the faster time seems to go, man. And, if you have kids like I do, it really is a marker there. My daughter's about to be a sophomore in high school. I remember walking her into school her first day. I really do. I remember it like it was yesterday. It's insane, man. So time does go so quick, but this got me reminiscent of way, way back when. So a great tune at number one is I thought everybody was firing on all cylinders, right? It had everything. 1989 that was great in music. There wasn't a lot of great music in 1989, but this gets me reminiscent and nostalgic for it. Now we'll go to my favorite tracks. Honorable mentions, the first song actually, Wait Until Tomorrow, Rain, April Sun in Cuba. My faves, Dreams of Ordinary Men, way back at number 9, that second video we saw from 1986. I got to do it, man. Are you old enough? I'm not going to walk around singing it, but it's a great song. And then this last song, Young Years. But I got to say, Dragon, I'd never heard of him. This was just fantastic for me. I love this kind of music. I think Joseph and I have very similar tastes in music. He's brought me some stuff that I really like, from this to Magnum to Marillion. We do differ a little bit on Sweet Baby James, but we can't agree on everything, right? And someday Joseph will, I'm sure, email me and say, you know what, you were right on that take. But anyway, fantastic journey. Let me know what you think of Dragon. If you're from New Zealand or Australia, I'm sure you know them very well. If you're from anywhere else, I'd be curious if you know anything about them. But let me know what you thought of this list, what your favorite tracks are. And until next time, guys, I will see you.